All right, welcome, you guys. Welcome to another great episode. This time of Behind this time, like they're not all wonderful, right? Welcome to another episode of Behind the Visual. I am your host, advertising lifestyle photographer Mark Hansen, and this is the podcast where I introduce you guys to all the people behind all those things you see out in the world, from advertising to music videos to everything in between. So today on the episode, we have Gregg Oneil, and Gregg is a creative director who's been in the business a little while, and he is a joy to talk to. Gregg tells some amazing stories. We start off with his first time working with the great photographer Walter Yost and another great one, Gregg Heisler. He tells some great stories of that. He gives us his thoughts on what make those guys good photographers or great photographers, and what you need to know to be a great photographer, and also what you need to know to be a good or a great creative director. There's also the story of a shoot he did for Comcast, where two of the actors ended up later in life becoming the creator of the show Glee and one of the main characters on Modern Family. So check that out and find out who those people are. And we discuss where ideas come from, how they pop into your head, working with AI, what that's like, and why you should be a student of your craft and know the history of it, at least to some extent, because it's really going to help you, I believe, and he believes, in the future. So I think you guys are going to love this one. So take a listen to it. Let me know what you think. Be sure to like it, share it, subscribe it, comment, all that kind of stuff. And here we go. So, well, what's okay? This is a new one for me. It's like, what right now is top of mind for you? Like, what's the thing you've been thinking about the most in the last day or two?
Professional wise, top of mind is the current work climate,
Yeah.
right?
Is
Agencies
AI
are struggling.
affecting you much?
Not really. Um, I haven't turned away from it. I've accepted it and I've adopted it and I use it as a tool.
Yeah, I think you have to.
Um, yeah, I look at look at your business as a photographer, right? I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
when I started in the business, photographers I worked with used film,
Mhm.
right? You shoot with Polaroids and bracket and all this other
Yep.
stuff. And then when digital came out, it's like you either had to adapt or you were a purist and you died off.
Yeah.
And the great photographers adopted it and adapted, right?
Yeah.
And Digitex came into the fold, so it got rid of the Polaroids.
Yeah.
You know, it's really interesting. I've worked with some, I worked with some pretty good photographers over my career, and the fortunate thing for me working with certain photographers was I learned really early on to trust photographers
Yeah.
that are good, right? Um, I hired them for a reason,
Mhm.
right? You look at their work and their books and you know, they're gonna if you hire the right photographer, they should bring something to the project that you never thought of.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it. Sort of my least favorite experiences were working with photographers who always wanted me to tell them what to do.
Oh yeah.
How do you want this situated? Where do you want the light? Where do you I was like, I'm like, dude, I'm hiring you.
Yeah.
Like, you kind of saw what my vision is. Like I, I don't need someone to just be the hand that clicks the shutter. I want you to envision things. Um,
Well, I appreciate
and
that.
and those are always the ones who are the hard, who require the most work, right?
Yeah, I
Like
can see
you
that.
have to do a lot of work to get the shot you want but when you work with great photographers, it's it's a treat because um, they see things that you don't see. And I was working with, remember years ago, I was working with Walter Yost
Oh wow.
and actually hadn't worked with him yet. We were bidding the project and it was a triple bid scenario. And my art buyer at the agency I was at, she had mentioned, because we're shooting for the 96 Olympic Games, and she had mentioned, well, give me a book of photographers that you like, And, back then we used to look at workbook photography, right?
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's how creatives came up with ideas, right? You're looking through these books and you're looking at stuff and you see visuals, you come up with headlines. And when you're looking for a photographer, you find sports photographers who you like their work. And she goes, find a couple of photographers you like, and then we'll put them against Walter because he'll be higher
Mhm.
because he's A-list, and then they'll pretty much dictate that you'll get the person you want. And I didn't know Walter. I mean, I knew of Walter. I
Right.
just knew he was like the guy,
Yeah.
and never expected that we would secure him. Um, but we were able to secure him because I was getting calls from the other photographers' reps. And my art buyer basically wiped her hand clean. She's like, look, I'm busy with this. You talk to the reps, you do this, that, and just let me know. Like when you start getting the estimates, just send them to me. I was like, okay. So I guess you probably shouldn't have done that. Because I didn't really know the rules of the guardrails. Um, but I was getting phone calls from the reps from these other two photographers. And the reps are like, we're trying to put this estimate together. We've got stylists, we've got makeup, we've got wardrobe, we got this, and how many assistants do you think he's going to need? I was like, I don't know. You guys are shooting. You tell me
Yeah.
what you need to do the job. And I started getting um, estimates coming in, and then I got a call from Walter's rep, and Walter was on the other line. He was in Daytona, like shooting something. And his rep says, "Hey, Greg," he goes, "Yeah, I just want to, reach out to you. Got Walter on the line. He really likes the assignment, loves the work you're looking to do, and we think he'd be great for it. But we know that if it's a triple bid government type of project, he's always put in as like as the gauge to like get somebody else the job, right? He's always put in there as like the decoy, I guess you could say."
Yep.
And Walter starts talking. He goes, "Yeah, Greg." He goes, "Look," he goes, "I've done a lot of work. I did a lot for the U.S. Army, and it's always the same thing. I'm put in. I never get the gigs because I always come in higher." And I said, "Well," and because I didn't know the guardrails, I
Yeah.
said, "Well, what do you consider high for this project?" And he goes, "Look," he goes, "I see this as a 3-day shoot. I could probably do it for X amount." And so on and so forth, and blah blah. And I said, "Well, what if I told you that the estimates I'm getting are kind of in that neighborhood?" He goes, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, that's shocking." Right?
Yeah.
And and I said, "Yeah." I said, "The estimates are coming in at a certain price."
Now, had you
I
told the
s-
other photographers that they were bidding who they were bidding against? Like, did they know Walter was one of the photographers that they were in the triple bid with?
yeah, yeah, and they had no concern, like, "Oh, we'll be lower than him."
Oh, well, then yeah, that makes sense because everybody went up on their price then.
Yeah, they're like, "Oh, we'll be lower than him."
Yeah.
And I started telling him, I was like, "Look, I didn't give him any specific numbers. I said, look, the range that you quoted is the range that they're in." And it's like, and they're asking me about, you know, stylists and wardrobe. He's like, "What?" He goes, "They're fucking athletes. They know how to sweat."
Yeah.
He goes, "They don't need, we don't need makeup. We don't need, like, they know what to wear. They know what to do. They know how to sweat." He goes, "No, I shoot this stuff very bare bones. I have like one assistant photographer and I have, and we just go out there and we shoot the stuff." And I was like, "Okay." I said, "Well, can you get me an estimate?" He goes, "I'll have one to you in a few hours." And he sent me an estimate. And it was like 5 grand lower than the other two people. And I printed them out. Like they got the they sent them over through fax.
Yeah.
And I brought them down to the art buyer. And I said, "Hey, guess what? Walter came in the cheapest." She goes, "How did that happen?" I said, "I don't know."
Yeah.
Right. But, um, but yeah, no, and that was the thing. And shooting with him and was, you know, um, I remember my group creative director was astounded. He goes, "Look," he goes, "you're having," he goes, he goes, you're going on the shoot of a lifetime at an early point in your career. He
Yeah,
goes, congratulations. And so that was my experience with Walter. And then Walter and I became friends. After that, we would have lunch in the city when he was in the city.
that's very
And
cool.
then he he pointed me towards Greg Heisler.
Okay.
Um, one day we're having lunch, and he's like, "Yeah, I ran into Greg Heisler the other day on the plane." I was like, "Who's that?" He goes, "You don't know who Greg Heisler is?" I was like, "No." He goes, "Shame on you." I'm like, okay, why? And he goes, "Greg is one of the most phenomenal photographers you'll ever know. Um, he is arguably if Annie Leibovitz is 1A, Greg is 1B." He goes, "That's." I was like, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, he's that good. Because if you ever get a chance to work with him, you better." So I always remembered that. And then a few years later, I was doing a campaign for Merrill Lynch, and we were shooting vignettes of people in an environment by themselves in a moment of reflection. And I bid Greg Heisler on this job. And I met Howard Bernstein, the who was leading Bernstein and Julie.
Right.
Howard and I became friends, and then hired Greg for this project. And knowing who Greg was and the reputation he had, he was the most down to earth A-list photographer I had ever
Oh, that's good to hear.
seen. Yeah, and it was funny because when we were triple bidding it for Merrill Lynch
Yeah.
to the client, she was the I believe she was the VP of marketing or the CMO, and her right hand man had come from Condé Nast. So when I was had all three portfolios there, he said, "Oh, Greg Heisler, you got to get him." And they were all coming in at like. Now here's the thing: it was they wanted a library of shots, and the
Hmm.
library consisted of 20 shots. All
Wow.
right,
Okay.
so ten different vignettes. We would double up with models and shoot one model here and that vignette and replace the model. So they would double. So 20 shots, all three, and it was shot in Northern California. All three estimates were coming in at probably $650,000.
Okay. Wow.
And I'm sitting there thinking, that's way too much money,
Yeah.
right? But they're all coming in at that price. I was like, I guess this is what it costs, right? So we got the estimates together, got the portfolios together, and went to Merrill Lynch, presented the options. And the one client was like, I know Greg Heisler, he's the guy. And she was like, all right, let's go with Greg. And we hired Greg for the project. He brought so much to this project that I never even envisioned.
Really?
Helping create the vignettes because the concept was it was for their wealth management line of business, right? So the idea was capturing people in moments of reflection where they have a time to where they have the time to kind of think about their financial life.
Yeah.
So say there's a guy who, you know, every weekend he goes on 50-mile bike rides on his road bike, right? Halfway through his routine, he pulls over, he's sitting under a tree drinking water, and that's the moment of reflection. But we weren't up on it like testimonials, we were pulled back. So you see the whole
Right.
environment and the
Yeah.
scene, right? Because the client was really interested in testimonials, and we didn't want to do testimonials.
Yeah.
So it's like, let's not do a talking head with a quote. Let's almost give the idea that we're peering into their inner thoughts and
Yeah.
where would that moment happen if there's someone who's and we had an architect or a financial guy who's at his house and he's having coffee like sitting next to his infinity pool,
Mhm.
right? So it's like everything was just dialed up a little bit. It wasn't his in-ground pool, it was an infinity pool. If
Yeah.
there's a guy who goes fly fishing, he doesn't take his he doesn't take his Land Rover to the river. He takes a seaplane to the river,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
right? So we just like dialed it up a little bit. And but a lot of these vignettes that we came up, like Greg came out with the seaplane idea. he came up with um, um, a woman who does a lot of gardening, but she doesn't garden in her yard. She has a greenhouse in her backyard, right? So just real subtle nuances that just dial things up. So he helped us with determining the vignettes, and then once we had shots locked in, improvising was so easy.
I'm sure.
And it was interesting because one of the first now mind you, I was the only creative person on this shoot. Okay. So
Damn.
it's a $650,000 shoot. I'm an associate creative director. The shoot is in Northern California. I'm the only agency person that flies out for the shoot. Account team didn't want to be there, clients weren't there, it was just me.
Wow.
I was like, all right, cool. This is awesome. This is also very nerve-wracking
Yeah.
because I'll be in deep shit if
Right.
this goes off the rails. But the client really bought into how we were going to do it. So right before, so we had casted, we had all the vignettes, we had all the locations scouted, and the day before we were going to shoot, got a call from the account team saying the client's starting to have a little bit of cold feet. They're not 100% sold on the voyeuristic. They want to see if we can do closer testimonials. And being a young creative in New York, I obviously I wasn't too pleased.
Yeah.
But Greg's like, no, no, no. He goes, look. He says, look, this will be great. He goes, we'll do it. He goes, we'll shoot it three ways.
Mhm.
Okay, we'll shoot it close up, mid distance, and further away. Pull back like we want, and we'll let them choose. So we speak to the account team, and they're like, okay, we can work with that. But the client also is still finalizing approvals on talent and locations. What they've approved was we had uh we had a high net worth individual who owned a horse. So they liked the idea of somebody owning a horse and being a horseback rider, but they liked the idea of the beach. So horse on the beach.
Right.
And the client said the first the only talent they had approved at the point was this young African American gentleman who was bald, like clean cut bald. So like, all right, cool, we'll make that work, right? So we go out to now what we're going to do is we're going to shoot that scene. We're going to shoot it three different ways. Then Gregg was going to process the film. We're going to strip it into layouts and then let the client choose one of the three layouts. Well, we're on the shoot and we're on the beach and we have our talent, we have the beach, and we had a horse. And it didn't feel like wealth management. It felt like an ad for the Caribbean
Mhm. Yeah, that's kind of
or
what I was
Bacar
thinking.
or Bacardi rum, or it just didn't feel like
Right.
what it wasn't feeling right. And I'm sitting there, I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking something's missing with it, right? This isn't the right environment. And Greg's on this 15-foot ladder, step ladder, shooting down at it. After about 15 minutes, he turns to me and goes, I don't like this.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, I'm like, yeah, I'm not feeling it either. He goes, did you meet Linda? I was like, who's that? He goes, it's the woman who owns the horse. He goes, she's back in the camper. He goes, it's her horse. She's wearing riding gear. She's in her mid 50s, very natural looking. It's her horse. Let's shoot her, but not on the beach. There's this grassy meadow area. We'll just get her there, like interacting with her horse, and we'll shoot that. I was like, all right, good, let's do it. Right. So we kind of scrapped that shoot and brought the set to this grassy, marshy area, and we shot it three different ways: close, middle, and back. And we love the shots. Like, God, these are really good. So the next day, Gregg then had to fly because he was using film that was only processed in two labs, one in Anaheim
Oh, wow.
and the other was in Atlanta. So he
Okay.
took a plane from San Francisco to Anaheim, sat all day, processed the film, got back to the hotel in San Francisco at like midnight, handed me the chromes,
Hmm.
and then me and the producer went to Kinko's. I scanned them in, put them into layout, printed out PDFs or exported like PDFs, and sent it to the account team by the morning. Like we had left Kinko's at like 4 a.m., which was 7 a.m. in New York time. So I sent the email, said, hey, here are the layouts, and I also sent the pictures we were trying to get with the first model and the beach and everything else with the rationale, like it wasn't feeling right. This is why it wasn't the right vignette and everything else. And we waited. And later on that afternoon, account team responds, you guys are good to go. Client loves it. Run with it. We're like, sweet. That was it. The rest of the 2 weeks, we were able to shoot what we wanted to shoot. Now, that first model, the young African American
Yeah.
like gentleman, we put him in a scenario with the infinity pool
Okay.
where he was this tech mogul, this that. So, and it fit right. Like it all felt right.
Right. Yeah.
And that shoot that we were shooting the pool side with the infinity pool, we had envisioned shooting down on it. So you would see this little round picnic table, and he's reading the paper, drinking his coffee, kind of in the bottom right hand corner, and you got the infinity pool in the mountains. And that's what we were intending to shoot. And this is at 7:30 in the morning. Now, when I say I love photographers who bring something to the table, he was on the other side. Now I'm standing next to the infinity pool. It's like 7 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning, and I'm just admiring the view. I'm like, geez, this is amazing. And I'm just sitting here with my arms crossed. I'm looking at the vista and the mountains. I'm like, God, it's amazing. Now Greg was on the other side of the pool. There's a little walkway area for like the pool cleaner to like to access the pool. But he was on that little plank looking to set up lighting. And I didn't know this, but while he was looking to set up lighting, he popped off a Polaroid of me standing there like this. And he goes, hey, come here, I want to show you something. I was like, what's up? He goes, what do you think it is? I was like, holy shit, dude. That is amazing. He goes, I know, we gotta get the models up here now because this, the sun's coming up, the clouds are perfect, we gotta get it now. He goes, mark that spot where you're standing. We'll get them up here. I don't care if they're made up or not. Just get them in a robe and get them out here. I called down to the trailer, the motorhome.
Yeah.
Models came up like 6 minutes later. We got them in place, one after another, because I said we swapped out
Right.
like
Yeah.
different talent. And that ended up being one of the most amazing shots we got from the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
And it was serendipitous because where I was standing, if you see the shot where I was standing, um, the sun was coming up. The sun was coming up right between my feet.
Really?
Like it almost looked so contrived and fake, but it was real. And the sky was so dramatic with the clouds, and it was had this backlighting feeling to it. It was really, really incredible. We were done with that shoot by 7:50 a.m.
Oh, that's
And then
amazing.
we went and got on the roof and shot the regular thing, right? That
Yeah.
we said. So that became another shot of the pool shot. And then we were also looking for a location that we hadn't found yet for an architect. Well, the house where this pool was a very ultra modern glass square house. It had a fireplace with this big long wooden desk inside. And as we're cleaning up, Greg says, hey, what do you think of that for the architect shot? I was like, I love it. Right. So having that having that trust and that faith in your photographer and giving him the leeway and the runway to contribute and make the work better. We were done with this shoot. We had all 20 shots. When we had them all, Greg's retoucher printed them out on really nice Epsons, did the retouching, put them up on the conference room wall like a gallery, and we invited our client over. Here's where your money went. And they were floored.
Oh,
It was a campaign that ran for the entire year in every publication known to man, every newspaper from Wall Street Journal, New York Times, LA Times, Chicago, Atlanta Constitution Journal or
oh,
Journal
wow.
Constitution. Um, printed mags like Architectural Digest, Cigar Aficionado, Kiplinger's, all these must have been 50 different publications. We ran full page, double
Oh
double
wow.
page spreads as well as single page spreads. It ran for the entire year. It was really, really great campaign. Um, because it was different. Nobody in financial services would shoot stuff like that,
Yeah.
right? And it was sort of a testimonial feel, but it wasn't a talking head. It was almost you're almost believing in it.
Right.
And after we're done with this call, I could send you the images that I was
No, I'd love to see
referencing,
them. Yeah, absolutely.
and
Yeah.
and you can take a look. But yeah, no, it was just improvising and being able to pivot when you need to pivot. And
I think
one
it says a
night,
lot about you as well, though, because
well,
I've
that's
worked with a lot of creative directors, art directors, where I'll bring up something like this is a kind of a cool angle here, or I like the way the light's hitting, or whatever, and they're like, "Well, we this is what we have. Let's go ahead and stick to this." And they would
yeah,
just want you to stick to what you've already planned out what's on the sheet, on the shot list. And well, you
yeah.
don't always, occasionally I get the ones who are like, you know what? I love it. Let's go do it. But it doesn't happen all the time. I wish it did.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because that's something halfway through this shoot, Greg and I went out for dinner one night and he mentioned that to me. He goes, "You're not like most creative directors."
Hmm. Yeah.
And he goes, he goes, "I appreciate your openness and letting me contribute and do things." I'm like, wow, like why would I? I'm not a photographer. I know shots I love and like, but I don't know how to I mean, I can take great shots with my iPhone. And I used to have a 35 millimeter. I used to take really good shots, but in terms of technical stuff and lighting, I don't know that stuff, right?
Right.
If I get a great shot indoors, it's luck, right?
Yeah.
But but I could definitely recognize crappy photography versus wow, that's a great shot.
Yeah.
And um and I think that's the challenge. And I know this is a long detour around the AI conversation, but what I find that is challenging as a creative person with the background that I've accumulated over my career is the prompting, right?
Yeah.
So I know what I want, right? I kind of have an idea, I can visualize it. And if I were talking to you on set and you show me, a shot, I'd say, all right, cool, I like it, but let's move the subject over to the right. So he's
Yeah.
in the first third of the page, and let's move it down a little bit. We see more of the horizon.
Mhm.
You know what I'm asking right away. The
Yep.
next shot, I'll get that. With I put that prompt in, the subject's still smack dab in the middle,
Right.
and something else has changed, right?
Yeah.
So it is learning a new language, but it's a language that, and I don't know, I could be wrong, but it's a language that was not created by photographers.
Right.
If photographers worked with programmers to say, let's come up with a language for AI that creatives can, like right now, I feel like it's I'm searching for the needle in the haystack and I'm guessing at what to say in the prompt to get what I want.
Yeah.
And I can get really far really fast,
Yeah.
but then dialing it in, that last 10% is really arduous process,
Yeah.
right? It's challenging. I wish, yeah, like if I say, select focus or let's have the subject backlit, it's going to come with different results all the time.
Yeah.
I don't want the subject facing me. I want them looking away. I want to be over their left shoulder, see sort of an angle of the side of their face looking towards the mountain, right? That seems pretty simple for you to figure that out and give me that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move the camera here. Let's do this, that, and the other. But if I say move camera right, it might be the opposite
Right. Yeah.
in AI. I'm like, no, that's not what I want. Redo,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that's the challenge.
I,
Um,
I've used it for, well, I have one coming up Thursday that the art directors used it for the layout to be like, here's what I'm thinking. I used AI to put these together. But then he
right,
also made it clear, I'm not looking for this exact shot. This
right,
is what I did for the layout. And I did it for myself. I've done storyboards for myself on shoots where I put in there, okay, this is close enough to at least remind
Right,
me this is what I want to shoot, something similar to this. And but
right.
yeah, I think what you're saying is those little tweaks I could see taking a lot of time, or if they ever get it right at all, you know.
It's very much the way I look at it is my mom was a chef, right? She was a self-taught chef, and when she had a restaurant in New Jersey, she had hired a chef from CIA in New York, very prestigious culinary school. Um, and if she tasked him with making the bolognese or what or a certain type of sauce, he would go back and taste it, and she's like, "No, this doesn't taste right."
Right.
And he's like, "Well, I followed the recipe." She goes, "Yeah, but you got to taste the food, right?" And the way I see now, I know it's going to get better, right? That's the thing. I'm not averse to it, but I see it as it can get you if you have all the recipes, you can throw it in the pot, and it can taste like pasta sauce.
Yeah.
But is it good pasta sauce, right? It's like
Yeah.
knowing what to add to get it where you want. That's where I feel I struggle with AI,
Right.
right? And other people, I know there's some folks who have really cracked the code that can dial it up and really get it perfect, but it's not common knowledge yet,
Yeah.
right? It's still a search. You're searching for the right recipe and you're searching for the right ingredient to add. You don't really you know what it needs, but you don't know how to, you don't know which spice is going to make it taste like that
Right.
yet,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
right? That's kind of the way I look at it. And the same with ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT, when it comes to copy, I use that as well, right?
Hmm.
It can help generate ideas and directions that I might not be thinking,
Yeah.
and it can spit out a bunch of options, and I might say, "Wow, that's a really interesting," and then that might spark something in me, and I start writing headlines based on that. So I use them as tools. I don't
Yeah.
use them as the solution. They're tools to help me find the solution.
Yeah, I'm saying with ChatGPT, I'll put in something, and my wife uses it every day almost. Like
Yeah,
she uses it, and the same as I do, to put it in like this is what I'm looking for, something like this. It spits it out, and then you go in and you tweak it to where you want
right,
it to be. Like you change this,
right.
move it around, or whatever to get to the where it says exactly what you want it to say. But it does it. It definitely takes a lot of the work out of it. So instead of taking like an hour, 2 hours to come up with this, all of a sudden you've got it done in 10 minutes.
Well, it removes writer's block,
Yes.
right? I mean, that the hardest thing sometimes for some people is starting,
Hmm.
right? But if you say, I need to start a paragraph on this, it's like it'll give you ideas. Like, oh, okay, right? It's like,
Yeah, yeah.
and then by the time you're done, it doesn't look anything like what Chat GPT gave you, but it really was a springboard to get your ideas on paper and going. So it does speed up the process, and
Yeah.
to me it'll eliminate writer's block
Yeah.
sometimes.
I mean, I've noticed that once I start writing, if I can force myself to at least, if I'm trying to write a list of something or come up with different
Right.
ideas, if I can get those first two down, the rest just
Yeah.
start flowing out. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, I'm just like nonstop writing down, and like I filled up a whole page, in 5 minutes,
Right.
where it took me 15 just to come up with the first one to write down on there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, because and that's one of the things that's challenging in the last 4 years with remote working, right? A lot of us work from home. We work, hybrid or whatever. The challenge with that is not being in office to bounce ideas off
Yeah.
people. And when you're writing and you're at your house and you're like, God, is anything I'm doing good?
Mhm.
It all looks like it sucks. Like
Right.
you start to
Yeah.
question like whether you're any good or not. It's like, oh my God, this is awful. And then, but what you miss with that human interaction is being in a room with a creative,
Mhm.
blurting out an idea in the middle of talking about the Chiefs game last night,
Right.
right? Or in the middle of talking about, this person or that person or this thing that, is in the news. Those conversations on the periphery that are meaningless kind of free you up, and then all of a sudden an idea comes, and you're like, oh, how about this, right? But if you don't have somebody in the room with you to do that, and you're just behind a computer trying to come up with ideas, that's the least creative way to come up with ideas.
Oh yeah.
I don't think any musician was told by their record label, okay, you have 8 hours to sit behind this desk and write a song,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It's like that doesn't work that way,
Yeah. No.
right? It's like there's no formula to it. And when people ask about the creative process, it's like I think there's a great Hal Riney quote from the documentary Art and Copy.
Hmm.
Um, I'm going to paraphrase it, but he says he says I think he says the most interesting thing about creatives is that we have no clue where ideas are going to come from today, and we have even less of an idea where they're going to come from tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it couldn't be more true. Like when I used to work in New York, my 9 to 5 or my 9 to 8 was, doing the heavy lifting and producing the work. But if I was tasked with coming up with ideas, a lot of times ideas hit me when I was on the bus leaving the city,
Yeah.
right? I'm on the bus, I'm sitting in traffic on the New Jersey Turnpike, and I'm just zoning out and thinking about work, and I start thinking of ideas.
Yeah.
But I never really had ideas sitting behind my desk
Right.
saying, okay, I need an idea.
Yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
know,
Yeah. It never comes.
let me summon the idea fairy, and they'll start pouring in. It doesn't work, for me, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work for me either.
Um,
I think it's very
and
similar to when you're trying to think of a name of something or you're trying to think of
right,
tell somebody and then you just forget about it and like whatever it'll come
right,
and like 30 minutes later when you think about something totally different, boom, it just pops in your head. I think it's very similar
right.
with coming up with creative ideas.
Like I remember when I was working at Red Tedmer in Philly, and we were being briefed on Comcast, and it was for their high-speed internet product, and we're being briefed, and the opposition is dial-up, so high-speed internet is faster and everything else. But there was one thing that Steve Red, who was the chief creative officer and founding partner of Red Tedmer, said in the briefing. Now, my writing partner was in another briefing, so I was in this one. So we kind of like split responsibilities. So I went to this brief, and Steve said in the brief, after the account team and the strategist spoke, Steve's like, "Yeah," he goes, high-speed internet, it's like a new language. And if you don't know it, you're gonna fall behind." And the moment he said it's like a new language, in my mind, I went to the movie Stripes
Yeah.
when Harold Ramis was teaching English to the foreigners at the very beginning of the movie,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I wrote Stripes on the brief, and that was kind of it. And I went, the briefing ended. I went back to, you know, our office, and my partner came in about 20 minutes later from his briefing, and he told me about that brief. And he goes, "So how'd the Comcast brief go?" I said, "Oh, well, here's the brief." And Steve mentioned this thing about it being a new language. And I'm thinking about Stripes when we had Harold Ramis teaching English the to the foreigners. And he starts laughing. He goes, "Dude, that's awesome." So we basically came with this idea, this campaign in the spirit of Stripes. So we had this teacher who was all knowing of the internet. His name was Mr. Webb, and he taught class to this random class of misfits who are not internet savvy, right? And different characters. And we ended up shooting like 12 to 14 spots. It was almost a
Oh wow.
sitcom, right?
That's
Same
great.
cast of characters, same this, but just a different scenario or a different topic every class time. And it was hilarious. And I say that because, you know, I've never been a creative who feels, well, the first 100 ideas you come up with are shit. The good ones happen at 101,
All right.
right? And sometimes I've had to take a long time to come up with ideas that really worked or were sold through. But that was one instance where something just clicked really quickly, and client loved it. Steve Red loved it, and it was just such a fun campaign to shoot. And interesting, two of the people in the class, our teacher was played by an actor called an actor an actor named Ian Brennan, who was the creator of Glee.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
And
wow.
one of our class members, who was, we called him Murph. He was like a 32-year-old frat guy who never got out of his frat mentality, right? Murph was played by Eric Stonestreet from Modern Family.
Really?
Yeah, so it was just, we didn't know. I mean, they were just actors trying to make it in the business at the time.
Yeah.
But it was really fun to see that, you guys like we kind of crossed paths
Yeah,
where you
that's
never really knew
cool.
that. Yeah, it was really cool. And Ian Brennan did something else pretty major recently. I saw his name. I was like, oh my God, Ian's really killing it as a creator.
Dude, you worked on some cool stuff. Yeah.
But it's that's another thing. It's I work with any clients who are looking for solutions, right? Sometimes I'll hear from clients like, well, we don't have a budget that you're used to, or we don't, we're not a fancy, sexy brand. I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
And like, it doesn't matter, right? I never turn my nose up to something that I find might be interesting.
Right.
And whether it's a startup or a well-known Fortune 100 brand, myself and the creative who I partner with and we work on projects together, we just solve problems.
How long have you been doing this just your own thing, like since you're leaving an agency and starting your own deal?
Past past 2 to 3 years after the pandemic, or during the pandemic, I
Right.
should say.
Like
Um,
it?
do I like it?
Yeah.
Now I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Starting out is always hard, right?
Oh yeah,
It's
absolutely.
you've got it. I used to cringe when I would talk to people who had started their own thing. And I was like, it took about a couple of years to get a client. I'm like, oh God, I can't wait a couple of years.
Yeah.
And if I think back now, I'm like, okay, we're kind of at the 2 year mark and we're starting to pick up traction. And um, it's just being consistent and also being a solutions oriented problem solver for your clients, right? We're not trying to do work for our own egos. Like we
Right.
don't, my partner and I, we don't, we like to believe we don't come with an ego. Um, because why? There's no right and wrong in what we do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's not math, it's not
Right.
science. It's, you know, everybody uses data, but even if you use data, it doesn't mean it's going to be right.
Mm.
Because if that were the case, there would be no failed advertising campaigns
Right.
out there,
Yeah.
right? It's like if data was great, then nothing should fail, right? Every communication out there should generate response and generate leads and sales and everything else. But sometimes campaigns or ideas just don't resonate. And we'll never hide behind the data. Like we use the data to inspire us, to help us come up with ideas. And we like to think we're pretty smart and strategic about it. And the main thing is partnering with our clients and being solutions oriented. And that's worked for us,
I
and
think
not
that's
having an
great.
ego.
I think that's the way to do it. I mean, I've worked with agencies, but I'm on the photography end, so it's all done with the
Right.
client. So I don't know what's going on back and forth. My wife's worked with a couple of agencies and with her company, and sometimes you can tell there is an ego. Like she'll come home and tell me what happened. Like with it, she had a meeting with the agency, and she'll come home and tell me, and I'm just working with enough agencies and creatives, I'm just sitting there going, what the hell are they thinking? Why would they
Yeah.
tell you that? Or why would they present you with this? And I think it's like you said, they have an ego. They think they're right and this is it, and she needs to go with it and she needs to believe in it and no matter what. And I think for somebody like you to come at it from a different angle and like not have the ego and like then I think
Well,
it works a lot better for your clients than the client who goes to an agency with the ego that maybe it's a big agency, but they have this ego and it doesn't work out
Right.
that way.
Yeah, I'm looking at something now I was going to try to share because we let me see if I can find it. I mean, that's one of the things that I recognized when I was going to start doing this on my own. And I've always toyed with doing it on my own for many years. But um there was fortunate to be in the agency business for the amount of years I've been in it because I hear a lot in the hallways.
Yeah.
And I would always hear down the hallways, creatives saying in passing, talking to their peers or their colleagues, I can't believe the client didn't choose that idea. They're stupid. We're the pros. That's why, like, we're the experts. That's why they hire us. And it always made me cringe because when I started in the business in New York, one of my earlier creative directors, they really they really pushed myself and the other creatives on the team to be very difficult on account people.
Yeah.
They said, they would say, if the account team is happy, you're not doing your job,
Oh, wow.
right? So as a young creative in New York, I'm like, great, I can make life hard for people. This is awesome. I have like, I just pass go, right?
Yeah.
I can do what I want. And then I started working with really smart account people. I'm like, I'm not really liking that idea. And so I would always kind of try to stop people in their tracks when I would hear them bad mouthing clients or talking about, oh, they changed the idea, it's not as good anymore, and and I always told them, I said, look, clients know more about their business than we will ever know. Okay, we meet with a client once every 2 weeks for 30 minutes. We can't possibly know what they deal with 24/7, 7 days a week,
Yeah.
right? We don't know the inner runnings of what's going on, what they're dealing with from leadership and sales and everything else. We just think that what we're doing is most important thing, and they should just listen to us. I think the key is they're experts at their business. We're experts in what we know how to do. And where I try and the thing is to bridge that gap. Let's bring our expertise to how we problem solve to solve their issue that is unique to them. And we just worked with a client where there were some conversations about certain language and words that might not pass through legal.
Right.
So my partner and I are like, well, can we get on the phone with you and your legal department and let's have a conversation? What can we say? Right.
Yeah.
And so we included legal, and they weren't, you know, they weren't the stereotypical what you think about in terms of legal. Like they were human, they were nice, they were, charming, and we're having a conversation and we get to a great place. They're like, okay, so legally you're okay with the copy that reads this? She's like, yeah, totally. I'm like, done. Right.
Oh, that's
So
good.
we're good, right? And we didn't compromise the idea. The idea is still there. The charm and the humanity is still there, but we just kind of worked with the right people and got the answers that we needed. Um,
Well, that's good that you guys went and did it and got legal involved instead of just going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth trying to get it dialed in. Where if you get legal on the phone like you did or on the call, then you can
yeah,
have it right
it's
there.
it's you like get the decision makers in the room,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Have them have them be part of the process, and always mindful of their time,
Mhm.
right? We say, look, we all we need is 15 minutes, and we keep the meeting to 15 minutes,
Yeah.
and we get the questions answered, and we say, all right, you know what? That happened in 12 minutes. We're going to give you back 3 minutes of your time, right? But one of our clients said to us in the meeting recently, she's like, "Oh my God, like working with you guys is like, why can't I get this from my agency?"
Mhm. Yeah.
Right? And that makes us feel good,
I'm
right?
sure.
And because we bring a lot more value than just the creative work that we do, right? We bring efficiency, empathy, civility, and really, really smart problem solving.
So if you were going to give advice to somebody who wants to become a creative director, what would you tell them is the most important thing, or what would your advice to somebody be coming up with this? Like, I want to get to that point where you are.
I mean, that's a great question because there are creative being a creative director is very tough because a lot of times you're pulled away from the work, right? You
Yeah.
become the manager, you become the people manager, you become sometimes your team's therapist. You become, you also have to, you can't just go into a client meeting and strong arm your way into selling an idea,
Hmm.
right? I think that's a that's a that's a misconception that, oh, well, since you're the creative director, you'll get it sold through. Like, well, if it's not a smart idea, it's going to be hard to sell it through,
Yeah.
right? I can sell through good ideas and smart ideas, but you know, it's I think there's a misconception of what power creative directors really do have. And the only power we really do have is to make the work better and on brief or beyond the brief and make it a smart solution for our clients. Um, but then there's also you're navigating meetings a lot,
Yeah.
right? You become more of a manager. And here's the thing that I've noticed with creative directors. There are a lot of creative directors, and this doesn't go for everybody, but generally I've found there are two types of creative directors. There are creative directors who are brilliant creatives, but not as brilliant of managers,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Kind of all over the place, but they're great creatives. And then there's others who are like brilliant managers, buttoned up, all organized, and they're solid creatives, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard to find great creatives who are great managers of people, right? It's hard.
I can see that.
And doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It
Yeah.
does. But I noticed there are times when I was a creative lead at an agency, you're doing just as much navigating the inner operations of the agency as you were managing the client and the work.
Yeah.
Sometimes more operations, right? I went to an agency once, and the first day I was told by the chief creative officer, who was in another city, another location, that, you know, there's a there's a rub between two of the creative leads that, need to kind of figure out because we might need to let somebody go. I'm like, hey, thanks for the first day.
Wow. Nice first
Right?
day.
Yeah. But what happened was I felt, you know what, that's not, I didn't, I didn't feel that was a very comfortable position for me to be in to come in right away and like start deciding who goes and who stays
Yeah.
without knowing what was going on. So I met the whole team and what I did was the two people who were in question, I met them individually and I asked them flat out, like, I hear there's a rub between you and this person. What's going on? How'd that start? Like, what are you feeling and everything else? And I'd find out the answer. All right, cool. I said, well, let me, thanks for sharing. And then the other person, I called them in like later on that day and we talked, met each other. And then I said, hey, real quick, I want to ask you something that came across, that like I was kind of hip to today. Like
Yeah.
there's some friction between you and this other person. And they told me their point of view. And it really was just a miscommunication.
Oh, wow.
So I ended up the next day, brought them both in the same room. And I said, look, I talked to both of you yesterday. You said the same thing. And I just think that it's a big miscommunication. I said, what I understand from what you said is you both respect each other's work and you don't want anything, you don't wish any ill will on either. So they ended up probably 5 months later, becoming like great, great allies to each other. Like they were just
Oh, wow.
they they were my two best creative leads, and they worked together. They respected each other. And here it was 6 months prior, I was supposed to let one of them go.
Right. Wow.
And I think that's the unfortunate part is you know, oftentimes people don't take the time to understand what the problem is
Hmm. Oh, yeah.
and figure out a human approach to solving it, right? Because most challenges are usually miscommunication,
Right. Yeah.
right? Um, like when I was told by my creative director in New York when I was starting out, be really hard on your account people. Right?
Right.
There was no miscommunication in that, but
Yeah.
there was a misinterpretation that all account people should be, you should treat them like they're, from another world. It's like they're
Right.
not.
Yeah.
So I like to be very clear. I like to be very open and honest, and it's being a creative director, as you asked, people aspiring to be one, know that your craft will change, right? What got you into the position you are, whether you start as an art director or a writer, you go up the ladder, you become a creative director, you're you're now removed more from the day-to-day work and
Is
the
that
craft.
something like when you're at a big agency like that, or is that something you miss when you go from when you transition up to creative director? Do you miss that? And is it something you get used to, or do you constantly?
No, you do it. Look, there are some people that love it, and they say, "Yeah, I'm done with the work now. I busted my hump to get to this point," and they enjoy it. But then there are others who really miss the craft of what you do,
Yeah.
right? You miss exercising that muscle in your brain, that creative muscle in your brain, right? And you become more of a you look at your calendar and it's nothing but meetings and meetings and meetings and okay, this isn't really that fun.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge. And some people like it because they like the level, they like the responsibility, they obviously like the paycheck because it goes up. But that's the one challenge in our business, right? You can't, it's very difficult to be an art director and stay an art director for 25 years and be paid like a CD,
Right.
right? If you're a 25-year veteran art director, you should be paid like a 25-year veteran creative person, not a, a second year art director,
Right. Yeah.
right? The only way to go up in salary is to go up the ladder,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you're going to be you know, that's like saying the only way a doctor is going to make a lot of money is to become a neurosurgeon,
Right.
right? Well, you can't just be an orthopedic surgeon and make a lot of money. You got to be a neurosurgeon. Like, no, I just want to be a pediatrician.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But why do I have to get paid at the base level? Like, it's weird. It's you know, lawyers, you're an attorney and you can be paid very modestly or very handsomely. Doesn't mean that your title becomes senior vice president executive attorney.
Right. Yeah.
It's you're
Yeah.
still just an attorney,
Yeah.
right? But your experience and your years of experience and your knowledge, warrants
Right.
that higher pay scale. Our business, you have to change titles to get that level of compensation.
Yeah.
That's the downside of what we do.
Yeah. I can see, especially if you love being an art director and you don't want to be a
Yeah. Like
creative.
you're a photographer, right? There's a photographer. You can make whatever living you want based on, your talent, your drive, your discipline, the breaks you get,
Yeah.
right? A lot of
Yeah.
times it comes down to breaks,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
You
Yeah.
happen to secure a great assignment with, you know,
Taylor Swift.
yeah, liquid death, whatever, right? Like you
Yeah.
do some campaign and it's like, wow, great, right? You're still a photographer.
Yeah.
There's no levels to being a photographer.
Right. No, you're right. You're completely right.
So
Yeah. So, well, I guess we're hitting on about an hour now, which is great.
that's okay. I could talk forever.
Okay.
It's ridiculous. I bore myself. So I always bore myself. Don't worry.
No, you're not boring me at all. I'm digging it. Yeah, I like it. I just try and keep them somewhere between an hour and a half if I
Yeah,
can.
no worries.
No, but I mean, this is great, man. I mean, I enjoy it. So, when did you figure out that you were creative? Like, at what age would you
Yeah.
start drawing? Did you start writing things? Did you piss off your
Oh
parents because you were doing something
God.
like drawing on the wall? I mean, what at what age did you like,
Oh
yeah, I'm creative and I'm not going to be a doctor, or whatever it was?
well. Um. Interesting. I love architecture.
Yeah.
Even now, I look and be like, God, I'd love to be a realtor. Like, not a realtor selling like, your suburban tract homes, but like, oh, there's a nice $15 million house. I would love to
Oh,
sell
yeah.
that, right? Um, but I've always loved architecture. I've always, you know, always kind of, I was always kind of drew as a kid, but never thought it was anything I'd ever want to do. But then I guess in high school, I kind of good at it, and my mother was like, "Oh, you should go to art school." I'm like, "I kind of want to go study architecture and engineering." And like, "Oh, you're so talented at art," and
Mhm. Yeah.
right. And I had a cousin, actually my mother's cousin, um, was a art director in advertising, and he had gone to School of Visual Arts in New York,
Hmm.
and he was an old school Mad Men ad guy.
Okay.
He was partners with Mary Wells and Ed McCabe and
Oh,
he
wow.
was at a lot of high level agencies doing very high level work. Um, but she's like, your cousin makes a lot of money doing advertising. I was like, so she kind of steered me towards art school, and it's worked out. But when I came out of art school, the one thing that they didn't teach you, they taught you how to do your craft,
Right.
but they didn't teach you how to make money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't learn this until my second year out of school. I was working in New York. My first year, I graduated and I was at Tyler School of Art in Philly. Great art school, great graphic design program. Typography was taught by, you know, brilliant type masters from Poland and so on and so forth. I mean, these guys really, really, you learned the craft of typography and design and everything else. So I always had that in my back pocket, but I changed to illustration my senior year because I fell in love with illustration and thought I was going to go to LA and do movie posters.
Okay.
So I
That'd be
completely
great.
changed my portfolio to an illustration portfolio, and then graduated, started looking for projects and work, and realized, this really sucks because I'm new, but I'm competing with people who've been in the business for 20 years,
Yeah.
and I got nothing produced. This sucks. So I ended up falling back on my design background, and I got a position at an in-house design department at a merchandising company in New York. So I was doing everything there. I was doing illustration, I was doing logo design, just everything. I was young. I was
Yeah.
22, 23. And after a year, I had heard that there were going to be layoffs. And I was like, oh shit. So I'm going to get fired. Right? 'Cause, like I always grew up hearing the phrase last hired, first fired, right? So
Yeah.
I'm like, shit, I was the last one to hire. I'm gonna be out of a job. So I ended up reaching out to a couple guys I went to school with, and my roommate said, "Oh, do you know this so and so? He works at this agency in New York. You should connect with him." I was like, "All right, great." So I connected with this guy, and I met him for lunch, and he was at this agency, NWA, and he knew from the very beginning. He was 2 years older than I was. So when he got out of Tyler, he knew exactly what he was doing. His dad was in the business
Oh,
as a
wow.
creative guy. So he was already on the path towards being an art director while he was in school. And he goes, "Yeah," he goes, "You know what? He goes, you gotta get into advertising. He goes, you're not gonna make any money doing posters for the ballet or the
Right.
symphony that they teach you in school. He goes, you got to make money in this how you're going to do it. I said, well, how do I get in? He goes, you just got to get a job as a junior art director. He goes, put together a spec portfolio, just create ads, redo ads that you see, and just build a book, get in somewhere, and just start learning. So within a week, I put together an advertising portfolio, and on the train going into the city one day, I'm looking through New York Times and I see that there's an agency in Princeton, New Jersey that won this big account. And so I called the agency, because back then you called people,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
right?
They'd
It
answer the
wasn't
phone.
LinkedIn. Wasn't LinkedIn, right? So you
Right.
call people and say, hey, can I talk to the creative director? Oh, that would be this person. All right, great. So they put me through. And I'd introduce myself and I say, hey, yeah, I'm just breaking into the business. I'm an art director. Do you need any help? He's like, well, why don't you come down and show me your work? So I drove down one day, I took a day off, started my work, and he offered me a position as a junior art director. When can you start? I was like, I gotta go tell my other job that I'm leaving.
Right.
Can I start on Monday? He goes, yeah, great. So next day I go into work and I go to my boss and I say, I'm gonna resign. And she's like, why? I was like, well, there's layoffs? And she's like, well, you're not going anywhere. I was like, oh, oops. I don't know. So I said, well, I think I'm going to take the job anyway. But I really appreciate and I left and I got it, and that's how I got into advertising.
Oh wow.
It was just kind of like dumb luck that I found it, and my paranoia of getting laid off or fired kind of steered me towards advertising. But now that I've been in it, I clearly understand, yeah, this is really for people who have the craft that we do, that's the best place to, really reach your value, right? Now, if I could go back and do it all over again, I'd love to be a photographer,
Yeah.
right? Be like doing the work you know, doing the campaigns I did and working with photographers. Like, God, I would love to be a photographer,
Yeah.
right? Um, but yeah, it was that's kind of how it all worked out. It wasn't a linear thing. But now, if I look back on it, it's like, it's a very tough business to be in. I would not want my kids to be in this business
Yeah. Yeah.
because of the uncertainty.
Mhm.
I've been at agencies where, you've done great campaigns and, you just launch a campaign yesterday that's going like gangbusters and tomorrow you get laid off. It's like, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
It's a very challenging business.
That's what I've always said about photographers. Is I've met some photographers who just had, I mean, they're not even like the top guys, but
Right.
they'll just have an attitude. And like, I'm
Yeah.
great, and I'm this, and I'm wonderful. I'm like, well, dude, you're as good as your next job.
Yeah.
Because you may
Right.
have done something great over here, but if you're an asshole to somebody, you may not ever
Right.
have another job.
Right.
So I think
Right.
you got to keep that in check. You know,
Yeah. There's no substitute for civility, right?
no,
There's no, and what I've learned, I mean, you mentioned or I mentioned earlier about walking the hallways and hearing people badmouth clients and this or
yeah,
account teams. One thing I also learned is clients want to feel like, and I say this, I have this thing I have on my site called listening is a lost art,
hmm,
right? People don't listen anymore. I've sat in conference rooms with clients and I hear conversations going on. I'm like, they're just not listening to the client,
right,
right? Like let them speak, right? Don't, y- you know, and clients want to feel that. And clients want to feel that they like the person that's sitting across the table from them that's working on their business. Doesn't matter who you are. You can have the lesser ideas, but if they value your relationship and they know that you respect them and you listen and not listen to obey,
right,
but listen to understand what their problem is so you can come with better solutions. That's what they want. They don't want people at the table that are going to, force feed ideas before they know what the problem is.
yeah. I think that's in general. I think relationships are a huge part in making the client
Right.
understand whether it's from a photographer's point of view or an agency point of view,
Right.
because I've had shoots where the art director, creative director loved working with me. And the next thing I know, they're asking me to shoot food. And I'm like,
Right.
I don't shoot food. I don't want to shoot food.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, you can do it. And I'm like,
We
listen,
don't care.
four people who
Here's,
can shoot food. They're like, I don't care. I
yeah.
want you to shoot it.
Right.
Next thing I know, I'm calling friends who shoot food. I'm like, dude, how do I
Yeah.
shoot food?
How do I shoot food? How do I light it so the food doesn't cook?
Right. Yeah. So then I'm like going and practicing how to shoot food and I show up, I shoot food. Luckily, I haven't done that in 15 years now because I
Yeah.
just refuse to shoot food unless I absolutely can't get out of it. But
Yeah.
it all just came down to the relationship. You know, they
Right.
liked me and they liked working with me. And I think that's a lot of like, there's so many people who are in this business that relationships would come down to the main thing, I think now. And if you have
Yeah.
a great relationship with whoever, you're going to get hired more, you're going to get more opportunities.
Yeah.
And
And I'm not bad mouthing agencies. I mean, there are a lot of great agencies and a lot of great people. I work with great people in agencies. It's just there are those, there are those certain things that you hear consistently
yeah.
that you just learn like it's just as a creative director, I work with great ones and ones who weren't so great.
Well, I think it's like
And
anything, like any
I
job.
try to learn from the good ones and I try not to do the things that the not so great ones did,
Right. Yeah.
right? It's kind of it's kind of how you grow up in life, right? It's like
Yeah.
don't do what the kid who just broke his neck on the bike ramp did.
Right.
Wear a helmet.
Yeah. I
You
think you're
know,
right. I mean, all agencies have, they vary. It's just like just people in general. It's going to vary.
yeah,
Great agencies, you're going to have agencies that have great people and not so great people. You get agencies
yeah.
that are not great at
And
all.
you could be an agency and you could be in a creative group where you're there for 5 years and you love it, and there's another creative in a different group who's can't stand it.
Right.
It's just it is what your own experience becomes.
Hmm. Well, absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
dude, I got one last question for you.
Yeah, man.
Maybe two. We'll see. What
No
is
worries.
the most unusual or strangest thing that's happened to you since you've been in this business?
Oh wow.
And it can be
Strangest,
anything.
the most unusual and strangest thing that's happened to me in this business.
I mean, I've had answers all over the place. Somebody just said being asked to be on this podcast, which I thought, okay, you really cannot come up with any ideas. So thank you, though.
I think the strangest thing is, like I said, we always think we suck at what we do,
Yeah.
but I think the strangest thing was probably a few weeks ago. I went to an event here in San Diego and I met a professor at San Diego State University, and she wanted me to come speak to her class. And
Okay.
I'm like, why? Like, okay. Because I don't think I have anything relevant to say a lot of times. I'm just like, I just kind of spew shit. So I was like, yeah, that'd be cool. Because I know like I could talk about the business a lot. And I understand the history of the business, which is a different point I want to bring up. So remind me. But she sent me a calendar invite and I went to speak to her class. I'm thinking like, because I went to art school, right? And my classes were like in a regular classroom, maybe 20 kids and whatever. But I go to this class, I walk in and it's a freaking auditorium. It's
Oh,
like
wow.
I'm doing a TED talk. I'm like, okay, this is weird. Like, all these people really know who they're listening to right now. But I'm sitting there looking at 100 students looking at me,
Yeah.
and I'm like, God, they're actually listening to me. This is cool and sad at the same time, right? But no, it was a great experience. It was strange because I never thought I'd be in that position to. I always like to give back and to mentor.
Yeah.
Like that's one thing as being a creative director. I've always loved the mentoring of younger talent and
Hmm.
helping not guide them, but be aware of what to expect.
Right.
Um, so that's probably the strangest thing that's happened to me in this business is that now I have a point of view that some people want to hear.
Well, yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Especially if you're young
which,
like that, you want to hear the history of somebody who's
yeah,
for you and what it's like to actually be in it. And I think it's very interesting.
and and you mentioned the history thing, and I mentioned it at the beginning of that answer. And the one thing that I think has been a challenge that I see in our industry is when I was coming up in the business, and I hate to be like, oh, when I was young,
Right.
but you hate to be that guy, but when I was a junior art director, we were hell bent on getting to that next level,
Hmm.
right? Improving our books, getting that next position, right? And to do so, you kind of had to know which agency you wanted to move on to, right? So you became a student of the business, right? You knew the agencies that were out there. You knew the work that those agencies did. Like you knew who did the Amex work. You knew who did Nike. You knew of agencies like Ground Zero in LA or Mad Dogs and Englishmen. You knew about Mullen and Boss. Like you knew the agencies.
Right.
And what I've found in the last 10 or so years is a lot of the younger creatives, they don't know the history of the business they're in. They come into the business with a digital mindset and knowing that they got to bang out a lot of assets for Instagram or
Yeah.
TikTok and just performance marketing assets, but they don't really have a history of who came before them. And it's I and that was part of my presentation to San Diego State was know the history of the business you're in, right? If you're going to be if if you're an aspiring guitar player, chances are you know who Jimi Hendrix is.
Yeah.
You know who Eddie Van Halen is, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Prince,
Yeah.
right? You've heard their music, you know who they are, you've studied them. If you're going to be an architect, you know who Frank Lloyd Wright is, you know who Frank Gehry is, you know who Ian Pei is,
Yep.
right? You know the architects that designed the Louvre or the Guggenheim. Um, if you're going to be an attorney, you know who the great attorneys are out there. Like you just don't. You become a history, like you become a student of your business,
Yeah.
and I think that's something that's lost right now, and sort of a disservice to the younger talent is they're not being forced to learn that.
Yeah.
They're just being forced to learn like a photographer, right? You're gonna. I mentioned Walter Yost to you. You knew who I was talking about,
Absolutely.
right? You didn't just learn if you're a photographer, you need to know who Howard Bingham is and these different great photographers that came before, not just, well, I know what f-stop to use,
Right.
right? I know the technicality of how to light things. It's like, no, you know who Annie Leibovitz is. You know,
Yeah.
like know the business. And I think that's the one thing that I really try to stress to the younger talent. And there's a great documentary called Art and Copy.
Yeah. I saw it.
And there were times I would play that in the agency at a lunch and learn.
Yeah.
And some of the comments were, it just seemed like it's a trip down memory lane for a bunch of old folks. That was the main takeaway. It's like, no, the whole takeaway is the great stuff that was done 30, 40 years ago. They encountered the same client challenges that we encounter. And
Yeah.
you can see how they solved them. You can see how, like, so it was really kind of, it becomes lost on some people.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, because you go in thinking all I need to do is know how to do these ads for Instagram, social media, or
Yeah.
whatever
I
it
just
is,
need to, yeah, exactly.
but you don't
I need to
understand
bang out
who
20
goes
assets
back.
for Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah. But even if you study who it is, like as a photographer, studying back, to like Annie Leibovitz, Herb Ritz,
Yeah.
Peter, it's one of those things where you get an inspiration, if nothing else, I think, and it helps you.
Right.
I'm not shooting like Peter Lindbergh, but it inspires
Right.
me to like, hey, has a
Right.
Lindbergh-esque feel to it. What we're
Right.
shooting right now, maybe I'm going to tweak it up a little bit, and it helps. So I think if you
Yeah.
know that, just the history, it helps you going
Right.
forward, no matter where you
Yeah.
are.
You can't be a filmmaker and not know who Martin Scorsese is or
Yeah,
Quentin Tarantino or, you know, whoever.
right.
if it's like, and that's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
Because we are in the craft and creating business. We're not in the numbers business where it's like you're an accountant and you need to know the great accountants before you.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's like
Exactly.
it's yeah,
Okay.
interesting.
This
So last question, you said you had another one, right?
I lied. This is the last
Okay.
question,
Okay.
and I don't even have an answer for this one, so you may not have an answer. What would be your walk-up music?
Oh God.
Yeah, I just came up with
You
this
know
one.
the hardest thing is because I love music and my palette for music expands different genres.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, God, that's a great question.
Yeah, like I said, I was thinking about it yesterday or 2 days ago or whenever it was. I was
Like growing up in
like,
New Jersey, obviously Bruce Springsteen was my brother and sister's hero in the late 70s.
yeah,
So I love Badlands and all that stuff. But then, if I think about artists, my all-time favorite artist is Prince.
yeah.
Um, Only because I just feel he's brilliant. Like
Oh, he is. Absolutely.
his lyrics are brilliant. He plays every instrument. He knew the business that he was in.
Mhm.
He knew that he had to own the masters,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
He says no one's going to own me. I'm going to own the masters, which is you know, the music industry is such a weird industry in and of itself that a lot of artists, you know, end up not realizing their value because they just didn't know how to. He knew how to,
Yeah.
right? He knew I'm going to own this stuff. I'm going to own my stuff. No one's going to own it, and that's it. So all-time musicians that I love is Prince is at the top. My walk-up music, mm, that's a good one. Um, I know I've got one. I know I'm trying. I'm just going through my head. I don't know. You stumped me, man.
I know, man. Like I said, I can't come up with one for myself, so it's totally okay. It's completely
Yeah, no, it
okay.
is. It's really
Because I was thinking
yeah.
walk-up music, what would it be? And then I was like, well, Pantera's got a song called Walk. I don't really think that would be my walk-up music, but
Yeah.
I don't know what it would be. But yeah, it's okay. I'm totally with you on the getting stumped by
Yeah,
it.
that's hard. That's a hard one. I'm not going to bullshit anyone and say it can't be one. It's like because if I name one, like after we get off this call, a half hour, I'm like, oh, why did I say that? I should have said that.
Right.
So
Yeah. No,
I
that's
know once I get in my car today, I'm going to be listening to. I'm like, oh, of course.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I love L.A. Woman. I love The Doors. L.A. Woman's a great song.
Yeah.
I don't think it's walk-up music though. I'm not
No.
going to hit a home run to L.A. Woman.
No.
I'm not going
No,
to hit a
probably
World
not.
Series. I'm not going to hit a World Series grand slam to Love Her Madly.
Yeah.
Um, Rolling Stones, probably Satisfaction's a good one.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah,
I can see that.
Paint It Black, I like.
I like Painted Black.
Paint, Paint It Black would probably be it as like a walk-up song. Mariano Rivera for the Yankees had like Enter the Sandman. That was great.
Oh yeah.
As he entered the game. That
Yeah.
was okay.
Yeah. That's a great.
I'm a
Yeah.
Yankee fan, but yeah, Derek Jeter had Alicia Keys and Jay-Z, New York State of Mind,
Oh yeah, yeah. Yep.
right? That's a great one. But Mariano had a great one with Enter the Sandman.
Yeah, I like that
Yeah,
one. Maybe I'll take that one.
I'd probably say,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, they're both retired.
Yeah.
Those guys are both retired. Just take those.
Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah, I'd probably say Paint It Black or something. I don't know.
All right. Well, dude, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, this has been great.
Yeah, this has been
Yeah,
very cool. I really appreciate
yeah.
it.